Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. Of course, I am James Boyd, joined by my editor, Jim Ayello. And Jim, we have lots to discuss. I know on this podcast, a lot of you probably asking questions about the game, the huge story that I and Zach Kiefer just dropped, along with editing from Stephen Cohen and my guy, Jim Ayello here as well. We'll get into all of that and even just the state of the team, where they go from here, season finale. But of course, we can't really dive into anything first except for the last thing we saw, Jim, which was this game. This game against the Giants. You cover the Giants as well. And so you had a match made in heaven. I don't know if you call it that, but what were your thoughts on the performance you saw from the Colts with their season on the line again and failing in that fashion?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, they're like, what was that like? And I was like, it's nice because I only had to watch, instead of having to watch two separate games with bad teams, I got to watch one game with two bad teams play each other and get it all out of the way right away. Yeah, it was an abomination. It was embarrassing. It was predictable, which is the hardest thing. And we'll get into this in the story, obviously. But like, I was texting with Charlotte Carroll, who was one of our Giants writers during that game, and Giants went up. And last week against the Falcons, I think they went up against the Falcons. She's like, "Oh, I have a bad feeling they're going to win this game." And I was like, "It's a long game. Don't worry about it." And the Falcons obviously crushed them. This time, when the Giants scored and went up, I texted her. I said, "I've seen this movie before with the Colts. They could lose this game. This might be a Giants win." And she was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah. Wait." And then it just kept going. I mean, it kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And I get it. I'll try to spin it positive a little. Guys like Jonathan Taylor tried to stop it from happening. At certain points, he made some boneheaded mistakes again. Michael Pittman had some nice plays. Alec Pierce made some nice plays down the stretch. The offense, to be fair, really can't be blamed too much. They did. Yeah, they did pretty well.
I mean,
Joe Flacco played a pretty good game. Obviously, the picks at the end were bad, but again, for the most part, offense was good. The defense, this is a train wreck. This is the god awful performance. I should have found him on Twitter before we started. What reminded me that I said last week.
Yes.
if the Giants scored more than 14 points, we should trash the Colts and they should be embarrassed. Listen, 45 points is insane. Like that is not a functional offense this year. They were averaging, I think recently and at home, like 13.9 points per game. I'm pretty sure it was like that. I mean, this is again, this offense,
Just
this
awful.
Giants offense was missing a bunch of its best players. Andrew Thomas is their all-pro left tackle. He hasn't played in weeks. They didn't have a fully again. Malik Neighbors was amazing, but not playing fully healthy. He was playing through injuries.
Nope, he was questionable coming into the game with like a toe injury, and I'm like, his toe looks fine because he keeps running away from all of you.
Everybody, as I said, I've never again. I'll swing it to you now because I could go on for a while. Is this the worst tackling you've ever seen from the Colts? Because unbelievably bad. I mean, I think you were saying that they made like Tyrone Tracy look like Barry Sanders at times. Like, yeah, it was just I couldn't believe how much the defense didn't show up in the biggest moment of the season.
Absolutely, and I think that was sort of a summary of this season. You know, missed tackles, missed opportunities, and missed expectations. I mean, obviously coming into this year, we knew it would be a question mark with Anthony Richardson, but this defense was supposed to be better than this. I know there were question marks about the secondary, but to see even the front seven, I mean, they only hit the quarterback, Drew Lock, one time. No sacks in that game, and you let them just run wild all over you. And I believe it was, I have to go back and watch the tape specifically, but there were definitely at least 3 touchdowns in that game that came off of missed tackles. You had missed tackles from Zaire Franklin, missed tackles from Julian Blackman, missed tackles from Kenny Moore, who had one of the worst games of his career, I think, in recent years. Not to say that he didn't own it. He did. But again, to stand in that locker room after the game, Jim, and to feel that level of disappointment from the veterans, and then to really, I guess we can get into it a little bit now, because I used it in a lot of this story that I did with Zach Kiefer. For those of you who might be a little bit curious, like, what story are you talking about? Go to The Athletic right now, and there'll be a story on there about the state of the Colts. Again, me and Zach Kiefer, the former Colts beat writer, wrote this story, and the title of it is Another Lost Season, Colts Face. After another lost season, Colts face another crossroads. There's, quote, no vision here. So that was pretty damning, and I think the way we planned this story, we had been planning a while, something on the Colts. It kept changing because the season kind of kept changing. Wait a second, they might actually be good after the Jets game. Wait a second, they might actually be on something after the New England game, and then it changed.
We started planning it during the Anthony Richardson benching. Like when he got benched, you and I and Zach and Steve started talking about what the story was going to be like. Did they miss at the quarterback? Like who was responsible for it? What are they going to do next year? Like that was, and then obviously he comes back and has those 2 games against the Jets and Patriots, and then we're like, oh, it's kind of shifting, and then they had that game against the Broncos. We're like, oh my god, it's shifting again. So it definitely was. It definitely was interesting, but I think the Giants game was the thing that kind of pushed it over the cliff for us. We knew. I mean, it was heading this direction anyway, because this is what you've written about and Zach's written about and I've written about on the Colts for years, is that they are just, again, I can't, people can't hear this enough. They're mired, or have heard it probably too many times is what I meant to say. Mired in mediocrity. That's just what they are. It's been 8 years of this under the Chris Ballard regime. He's 61, 69, and 1, under 500, no division titles. Like, it's just the same movie on repeat.
I think you said it
over and over again
the other day, not to cut you off. I did. It's always funny people say not to cut you off. They do. But
I did. I cut you off before.
Yeah,
so
but fine. No, just to bolster what you're saying by what you've previously said. We were talking about this team. Their biggest accomplishment in the last 5 years, which is second contract guys, veteran guys, is almost beating the Buffalo Bills in 2020.
Yeah, losing to the Bills in the wild card round. That's it. That's the best they've done.
That is the best they've done. And so to me, it was very, very, very shocking to stand in that locker room after the game and talk to, Michael Pittman Jr. And he's saying, like I put in the story, something's got to change. Don't know what that something is, but something. And then you have, Kenny Moore saying, oh, I'm not sure what's next or how we can fix this. Because he said, he was asked, do you have the players here to compete, to take that next step? And he said, yeah, I believe we do. So I asked him, then why haven't you? Why haven't there been any progress? And he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then you also have DeForest Buckner a day later, who was seething on the bench in the fourth quarter, just as mad as ever.
Yeah.
And probably as fed up as I've seen him. He said, we shit the bed. And then he also says, hey, I believe in my teammates. And I'm like, wait a second. Okay. Not to say you trash your teammates, because he would never do that. He's got too much character. No. But I'm just like, okay, but Buck, you just said you shit the bed, but you also believe in your teammates and you can get this done. So why have that belief? And he's like, I just believe in the guys in the locker room. And I'm like, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're just not good enough. And this whole thing, again, is not, I don't think, the fault of any one person. I hear a lot of people yelling Chris Ballard, and obviously he is not absolved of anything. They're yelling about Shane Steichen, who we'll get into as well. They're yelling about Anthony Richardson, who we'll get into. I mean, with the latest, breaking news that he dropped, I was like, wait a second, that was a big thing as well. So we'll get into all that, the back stuff. But to kind of segue into this story and just the Chris Ballard part of it, I think the quote that really sticks to me is when he said, if it gets me fired, so be it. After I asked back in August, why should anyone believe in what you're saying and what you're doing? I believe it was August, September. It was right before the season when he did his annual press conference. And at the time, you can say, oh, things will be different. Wait and see. We waited and we've seen. And it's been
every
not
year.
Just that. And it's not just that they fell short of the playoffs. I mean, coming into the season, I thought, okay, maybe 10-7 if Anthony takes a step forward. The guys, the veteran guys are still playing at a high level. But even then, if you had told me, hey, they went 8-9 because Anthony just struggled this and that, that's whatever. But to lose in the way that they have, it's like, you built this team. You invested in these players. You said the infrastructure of this team was good enough to add a healthy Anthony Richardson and then contend for an AFC, South championship. And you were out of contention for that, weeks before the season ended. And then last week you lose in epic fashion. And then what the most crazy part about it is we're all watching on Saturday night, the Broncos and the Bengals go at it. And we're like, man, oh my gosh, the Bengals just kept them alive in the most epic fashion. And you fall flat on your face. That was crazy to me. Again, a very hard thing to justify as a GM, and it certainly has to come with some hard questions here in a couple of days when the season ends and Chris Ballard does his annual press conference at the end of the season. And then, it's tough. And then also, we haven't heard from Jim Irsay, which I'm sure we'll hear from him at some point. We have to.
You think? Yeah.
I would hope so,
Yeah.
about owners meetings or whatever. I mean, you guys know this. He's pretty friendly with the local media. I'm just like waiting for that, that call, that text to like vent. I'm like, somebody's got to get it. Somebody. And so that has to be coming. And this is the same owner who said at the beginning of the season or back in July, this is the best team we fielded in a while. And the story, that quote is kind of chopped down, but the full quote is like, yeah, I believe we're out of the woods now, past the Andrew Luck stuff, past that to where we kind of reset. We have our guy, but it just hasn't worked out. And I think that's a big, big part of, again, this big three that we kind of went at in the story. And I get a lot of the comments are like, well, the problem starts at the top with Jim Irsay. He ain't firing himself. He ain't getting rid of himself. Owners don't do that. So we have to look at other things and analyze them, which we also analyze Jim Irsay as well. We've had him accountable over the years. And so my question to you is, after we get through a lot of the GM stuff, and again, we could talk about it forever. We could say Chris Ballard, even this year alone, your first 2 picks haven't done much. You said you got the best defensive lineman in the draft. Jim Ayello, feel free to weigh in. Who is that? Who is the best edge rusher in the draft this year?
You are in my brain. I was literally pulling up True Media right now, looking at the rookies on the pass rush. Like, I swear to God, I was pulling it up just to see where Latu was. And he's 6th in sacks. He's got 4. It's fine. It's fine. It's a fine season. Jared Verse has 4.5. DeAndre Tillman, who also made trouble for the Colts, has 5 sacks. Jonah Ellis has 5 sacks. Chop Robinson has 6 sacks. And Braden Fisk has 8 sacks. So, no, definitively Chris Ballard, at least this year, you did not get the best pass rusher in the draft. You had the opportunity. Let's be clear. You took the best. There was one. You took the very first defender in the draft. And I don't believe the guy that you picked is going to even be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. Quinyon Mitchell, a guy that a lot of people associated with the Colts.
Rookie of the year.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Rookie of the year. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. A lot won't be in that conversation either. He had the opportunity to pick any of these guys who are going to contend for Defensive Rookie of the Year and didn't.
Right.
And it's not, that's one thing, and it's not the thing that should get him fired, but it's piled on top of the,
Exactly.
What I can't get over, man, is how I couldn't get over that feeling in my gut when they were playing the Giants going, I've seen this happen before. We watched this happen when they were playing the Raiders in 2021 or 2022. I can't remember. I always blame this on the years. 2021, I think. And they had a chance to clinch a playoff spot and couldn't get it done. Then they get to play the Jaguars and in week 18 to try to clinch a playoff spot, couldn't get it done. Like, we see them collapse against the Vikings in historic, epic fashion. This is the team the Colts have become in the last 4 or 5 years, is the teams that can't get it done on the big stage. You wrote about it. You wrote about it in recently, like in your story after the Giants game.
Yes.
They choke on the big stage. They choked against the Broncos. They had the game. They had that game against the Broncos, and they choked. Then they had the game against the Giants. Like, that's not a game they ever were controlling, but they should have won that game given the talent disparity and the momentum of the season. The Giants are done, man. They are done. They've been done for 2 months.
They hadn't won a game since October.
They were 10-game losing. Oh, can I give you? I don't know if Colts fans probably already saw this stat. Now I'm going to credit Doug Analytics here on Twitter. Drew Lock's 1.1 APA per play versus the Colts is the 6th best of any quarterback since 1999. Are you ready for here's the list: Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, Lamar Jackson, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Lock. That's it. Those are the 5. Did you hear those names? Those are all Hall of Fame names.
Yeah, including Drew Lock.
I
mean, after that game, he had more touchdown passes in the first half than incompletions, 3-1 in that game.
He was
and a perfect passer rating through the first half. You had, what was the end of the game?
Yeah,
go ahead.
17 of 23 for 309 yards, I think. Sorry, 309 yards, 4 touchdowns, no sacks, no picks. I mean, he was, and he ran in a touchdown. I mean, one of the best quarterback games I've ever seen, and it was Drew Lock.
Yes. And perhaps, again, I think there's multiple layers to this game in particular, and to kind of put a button on the whole draft thing, and we kind of got on a tangent there. Your second pick of this year, A.D. Mitchell, nothing. He's had a really rough rookie year. So those are supposed to be impact players. When you pick guys in the first 2 rounds of the draft, those guys are supposed to start for you. They're supposed to make plays for you. They're supposed to make an impact that you can feel, and that hasn't happened. So, again, that's just the latest of what has happened with this team. Now I think we can get into beyond the game, but just the optics of everything else around it. Namely, Zaire Franklin. You're a multi-year captain.
Yep.
you go on your podcast in October and you say, I want to play, a sorry team like the Giants. I want to play a 4-11 Giants team. Give me them. We gonna spank them. And then that clip, shout out to the fans for finding it and tagging me in it, gets reposted after they spank you. They scored 45 points against you, the most they've scored in 9 years, the most they've scored against the Colts in 20 meetings since 1950. I mean, that to me just screams unserious team.
It is.
And I'm like, and again, we were talking to Zaire yesterday. Are you going to continue the podcast? He said he's going to have to evaluate some things. And we're all thinking, yeah. Because it's one thing to have a podcast and, say some stuff, whatever. But when it comes back on the team and the seriousness of your team, you have to answer for that. Imagine standing before DeForest Buckner and having to explain yourself for that. Or standing before Shane Steichen, your head coach, and explaining yourself, or standing before your GM and explaining yourself for something that you should have had much, much better judgment on, and just an overall respect level. And then I think the thing that a lot of fans have pointed out or tried to hint at, and I can't get into like the psyche of a player, and I can't discredit everything Zaire has done for his career, his life. Like people are like, oh, he's not a competitor. No, he is. You don't come from where he's come from and go through the things he's been through and get to where he is without being a competitor. But I do think that it's fair to wonder, did the success of last season, did your contract, did any of that, sort of just change what your priorities are to a certain extent? Because there were a couple of comments, not just that one about the Giants. He trashed the Titans before the Giants game. And then you have Jeffrey Simmons chiming in on Twitter after the game. Hey, man, I'll see you in Cabo. like that's this is rough stuff. I know. It's stuff like that.
Good for him though.
Yeah. Again, there's another.
Jeffrey Simmons has accomplished a lot more than Zaire Franklin's ever accomplished.
Yes, he's been an All-Pro, I believe. He's been a Pro Bowler. Like, he's had good years. I remember.
Been further in the playoffs too.
Exactly, and I remember when Anthony had the tap out moment. Zaire went on his podcast and talked about the tap out with his audience, and said on the podcast, I haven't necessarily even talked to Anthony yet. Why would you do that? That's the biggest topic in that at that point in time. Yeah. That was the biggest topic in the NFL world, was Anthony Richardson tapping out, and then you don't go to your young quarterback and talk to him about it first. You go to your podcast. That to me encapsulates a team that's a bit unserious. And then we can now move on to the coach. And trust me, again, we'll get into Anthony, we'll get into his back, and I'll kind of do it in the order of the story that it was written. We went from GM to coach to quarterback. So moving on to the coach. Jim, I'm curious to know from your perspective.
Yeah.
What has it been like from afar? Because, I'm here every day, but from afar, listening to Shane Steichen's messaging and then, working with me on the behind-the-scenes aspect of it when a source reaches out almost every time, it feels like, to clear things up that he further muddied.
It's disappointing because I'll start with this. I believed Shane Steichen was a good coach last year. You wrote a great big feature about him being a very detail-oriented, and we knew how good a play caller he was from his time in Philadelphia, and I thought he had a pretty good year last year with having to deal with the Richardson thing and pivoting to Minshew. Again, I really thought he had the makings of a good coach. I'm not saying he still doesn't. I'm not giving up on Shane Steichen, but I think what we talked about for this story was the roughest part for me to understand was the failure to learn your lesson over and over and over again. When you fumble the messaging so badly after the Anthony Richardson benching, learn from that mistake. Understand that you need clarity and you need to be, again, I said this in a message to you guys, like, it's a little bit of a cliche, but like, when there's a fire around your team, you need to be the fireman who puts it out. And instead, he just dumps fuel on the fire and makes it worse. And that's because the messaging isn't ever clear. Again, he doesn't have to give you, the media, so us, I guess, all the details. That's not what I'm asking for, because I understand that's not going to happen in the NFL. But he does have to provide some clarity as to the thought process and what is going on with the team, because that is what you guys are there to ask. That's what fans want to know. Go ahead.
Exactly. Because to me, what was always lacking in his messaging, whether it was the benching, which he never explained until Joe Flacco went out there and was terrible for 2 games, and they basically had to play Anthony again because they couldn't look everyone in the face and keep saying he's the best option to give us a chance to win.
Well, you had a veteran in your story tell you the exact thing, that exact thing.
Exactly. No. The again, talking to different people behind the scenes, obviously players on the team. There's one player who was saying when that happened, we were all like, okay, we understand a little bit, got to hold Anthony accountable for what I understand now to be a lack of preparation.
Yep.
A lack of seriousness when it comes to the job. There's a quote in the story where Anthony, after he regained his job, he's saying, even if I don't want to, do this and the guys are asking me, I have to do it. The fact that you said that out loud is like, you probably got to grow up a little bit. And then you have a player who was like, but then once you switch to Joe, he wasn't the guy either. And then we switched back. So it's like, at what point do we have a uniform vision? And so that's tough. And again, the part about Shane is when you don't grab control of the messaging, and I'm not saying just get out here and blatantly lie, but when you don't grab control and add some context, it lets whatever other theory run wild. And so, again, when you benched Anthony, you didn't explain this mysterious process until he was basically back into the lineup. For 2 weeks, you allowed yourself and him to get crushed publicly because you didn't look like you didn't look like you knew what you were doing. I think the most annoying part about it from a fan base standpoint is that we know you're smarter than this. You are paid a lot of money to think about this team at no end. I think about this team a lot, but not nearly as much as Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and others. That's their job. And so when you come out there and you don't say anything, you look like you don't know what you're doing. And then to follow that up with originally saying, oh, Anthony's really sore.
He's
got
sore.
some soreness. And we're like, man, the season's on the line. He's sore, and he missed the entire week of practice. There is no gamesmanship in the NFL when your quarterback misses the entire week of practice because you have to build your game plan. It's not the same as if running back misses a couple of days, or if DeForest Buckner's not in there for a couple of, your entire offensive game plan is built around your quarterback. So at that point, when Anthony wasn't out there that Friday, we all knew this guy's probably not playing. Like, it's a miracle that he plays. And the fact that he was even questionable and then ruled out the next day was ridiculous because he eventually told us, hey, by the way, I couldn't walk. But your coach, he doesn't have to say that, but he has to say more than soreness, which we grilled him for it after the Giants loss. It's like, wait a second. Why do we have to have a team source reach out to us to kind of clean up your mess again? And I asked him, do you think your messaging has hurt Anthony this season? He's like, well, I try to keep things in-house and I'll go back and review everything. And I'm like, that ain't it. That's not it. And I think there is, I can't speak for Anthony, but personally, I'm just saying, me, James Boyd, if I was in his shoes and I'm like, man, I am struggling. I'm dealing with a back injury that's I can't walk. And people have been saying, oh, he said he couldn't walk on Tuesday. On Tuesday, he met with the media because that was Christmas Eve. It's my understanding that it was Tuesday night, like when it really kind of locked up on him. And again, they didn't even practice on that Tuesday, and he only has talked to us for like 7 minutes or whatever. So like, I get it. People are like, he can't walk. People, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that he's in a wheelchair, but it means it's very painful for him to probably walk around a lot. Yeah.
It's not hard to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just to clear that up, like, I get it. Like, but it was definitely, from my understanding, again, talking to people behind the scenes, that it was later on that day and that night when it really, really bothered him. But to have your coach not explain that, and then you having to go out there yourself, it's like everyone has asked Anthony Richardson to grow up, and he has had to. But then it's like, you need to grow up. You need to be the adult in the room. You need to own some of this as well. And so I think that was a big source of frustration for this fan base. And even, again, talking to people behind the scenes, talking to guys in the locker room, there is some questions about the messaging and just that unison. And as
vision,
right, I'll bury the lead here. The money quote in the story from a veteran Colts player, and I'll just read it in totality. There's no vision. From the top down, from the front office to the coaches to the players, no one is ever on the same page. And every year at the end, we're sitting here losing. If you look at the best teams in the league, they all have a vision and they commit to it. The Chiefs keep winning because they have a vision. The Lions turn things around because they have a vision. There's no vision here. And I thought the Lions part was really telling because, it's easy to say, oh, the Chiefs, they have a vision. The Patriots, they have a vision when they were winning with Tom Brady. But the Lions were the worst team imaginable a few years ago. And now they're one of the best teams in the NFL. And you can tell, like, their coach, when he speaks, they listen. He's convicted. He's crazy enough to go for it on fourth down every time. Like, it's Madden. Like, the dudes in that locker room believe in him. their vision, who they are, what they stand for, even them going out and playing as hard as they did against the 49ers in a game that in otherwise didn't mean anything. It meant something to them because that's their identity. That's their standard. And this player is saying what most players have murmured about and said bits and pieces about, man, it's the same thing year after year. And honestly, a lot of this stuff doesn't even have to be an anonymous player or anonymous source. You have players saying this. You have DeForest Buckner saying, I'm frustrated. It's the same thing again. We messed up. We failed again. And so I think that when you don't have a coach who can kind of step in when things are tough and at least provide some clarity, some accountability or something like that publicly, or just a strong sense of that you care, that's tough. I thought it was interesting myself that Gus Bradley appeared to give, not saying he had to change personality, but just a bit more conviction or a bit more sternness in his voice about the terrible defense, the accountability. He was even saying, hey, players are fined and players are, docked playing time when they're late. When Shane was asked about these accusations from Pat McAfee, he just said, well, guys, they show up, not every team's going to show up, or every player on every team is going to show up every time on time. Huh? Who wants to hear that? And he's like, there's a standard. What is it if you're saying that? But again, that need to keep things in-house has hurt him a ton this season. And I think now we can get into not only has it hurt Anthony, but Anthony himself. Again, yesterday we're trying to get through this big story that we dropped, and I'm we're going through last edits and making sure every comma and every period goes in the right place. And I'm sure this is not an inside joke, but I'm sure Jim will appreciate this. After every story I write, there's always like 5 changes. I'm like, okay, change this word here, put this comment here, whatever. And he does it. I love you for it. But for this story, I'm not going to lie. Nothing to change because we looked at it so many times, which is usually what happens when you have the bigger stories. I mean, there's not just 2 eyes on it. There's, a ton of people. There's copy editors as well. So we dropped this story and it's out. But right as we're working through this story, Anthony says yesterday, by the way, I might have a chronic back injury. I got an MRI. I have a disc problem. I've been dealing with back problems since I'm in 8th grade. What was your reaction to that part of it? Because that was new information. I mean, obviously we got kind of lucky with the timing of the story, but that was obviously a complete and utter 180 from what Shane Steichen said initially. It's just soreness.
Yeah, it's kind of why I thought your point, and I wrote it down as you were talking. I think that your point about everybody asking Anthony Richardson to be more professional. It's like, hey, could you lead by example? Probably, like maybe just show him what it's like to be a professional. Again, there are guys in that locker room, DeForest Buckner, Quentin Nelson, who do. Don't get me wrong. Like there are guys who he can look at for that example. However, his head coach continues to not protect him in the ways. And I will say his intent has been to try to protect Anthony Richardson. His execution has been so poor that it's made it worse. But again, you've got guys with C's on their chest like Zaire Franklin who are picking fights with Pat McAfee, who are talking about wanting to run over bad opponents, only to get crushed by them. Like Anthony Richardson needs guidance and an understanding of what it's like to be a professional player in the NFL and an NFL quarterback. Again, clearly he does not have an understanding or an appreciation of that, or didn't before the benching. So it's tough when you put him in this environment. Like you said, it's unserious. It's not professional enough for him to just look around and be like, okay, this is what I should be doing too. He has to be told because he's looking at some other people and going, well, they're not really doing their job either. And so it's frustrating on that front as well. But to the back problem, I don't know, man. Just throw it on the pile. Like it's one of those things where I'm like, of course, like the Colts can't have like one thing go wrong. It's got to have 2 or 3, 4 things go wrong. And Richardson, we can get into this now. Like I think I've been as staunch a Richardson defender as there's been out there in terms of I still think he can play. But we're 2 years into this. He's missed pretty much half his games, either due to injury or benching. I think it is that. That's a problem. Like that's a huge issue. And now if you're talking about a chronic back issue, that's going to be an issue. And again, he's not sure if he has to have surgery. I'm not saying he should be sure, but it is, again, who knows? Like where are we going to be on that? And so he hasn't proven himself that he can stay healthy. We talked about this was kind of a part of back into the process James and I had for the story. The Anthony Richardson 3-part journey right now hasn't proven he can stay healthy, hasn't proven he can be an effective passer consistently, hasn't proven he can be a leader. And we're 2 years into this. So now we have year 3, which I assume he'll get. You and Zach had sources inside the building that say, again, this, assuming things don't change and there's not a new GM
Regime,
or whatever.
right.
The intent is to let Anthony Richardson be the starting quarterback in 2025, which I think is the right decision.
Yeah.
But this is it. Like,
it's
one
make it
more
or break
year.
it. It's make it or break it.
Because 2 years in, there's been flashes, no doubt. We've seen some really exciting stuff, but not nearly consistent enough to entrust your franchise to him. So, the back injury just makes it worse, man. It just to me, it just piles on. It adds more questions to Anthony Richardson's resume, and we already had a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, it raises a ton of questions that I'm sure we'll discuss going forward, because now the bigger question is, okay, why didn't you, if he's saying he's been having back issues since 8th grade, why wasn't this something, or if it was something that you knew about in the draft, why did you take the risk on him? And I do think that we've talked about this before. The not oddest thing about Anthony, but just the part that can kind of break your brain a little bit is that he looks like a Greek god. He looks like Superman. He looks like an action figure. But throughout his entire life, since he's played football, I mean, there's the show QB1. I believe it was on Netflix originally, but it got moved to another platform. But you can check it out. It's out there. I watched it with a young Anthony Richardson. It's pretty cool, actually. Bryce Young is in the show as well. But in that show, Anthony's senior season of high school, he has an AC joint sprain. He's out for most of his senior season. He got hurt at Florida, had a knee surgery at Florida, got hurt in the NFL. He's missed 16 games with a concussion, a shoulder injury, a back injury, an oblique. They've asked him to do two things definitively that he was never that great at: be healthy and be accurate. And then you also have, just the leadership part, where having to have your leadership council meet with your young quarterback to tell him, hey, man, we need you to work harder. That's not a good look. And then on top of that, you can look, and I'll be honest, we were having this debate in the media room yesterday about talent versus discipline and all those things. You can get away with a lot if you're great. You can get away with a ton. I mean, one of my favorite players of all time, probably my favorite athlete of all time, Allen Iverson, was this very, with me or against me type of player. He would drive you crazy because he would even admit himself, I didn't really work as hard as I needed to, but he would give everything on the field, on the court, and he would ball out. The dude was amazing. League MVP, 10 plus years as being an all-star. He was great. So when him and, Larry Brown were going through it, not to go down too far the rabbit hole, you deal with a lot of this stuff because he's that great. But when you're not working hard enough and then your completion percentage is the worst in the league at 47.7%, when you cannot make the routine throws at a high enough level to even make your offense sustainable, then it begs the question, how can we win with this guy? How can we move forward with this guy? And so I think that there are a ton of questions about the quarterback position going into the offseason. And again, as we've said, and as we've sourced out, the plan right now is for Anthony to be back in the saddle in 2025. But I'll even add this caveat, though, or not even a caveat, just this tidbit. What options do they really have? You know what I mean? Would you be saying the same thing if they had a top 5 pick?
No, it would be a question.
If they had a ton of, talent on the free agency market, which never really is the case with quarterbacks. They don't become free agents. But I'm just saying, in a different world, if there's, a Brock Purdy on the market, if there's a, Sam Darnold, who I think will be back, with the Vikings, if he's on the market, if you get, again, a Lamar Jackson, who a few years ago, people had a chance to go get, would you be saying, okay, Anthony's going to be the starter next season? I'm not sure about that. And again, I think next year is a make it or break it year for him for sure. And so it's just the weird part about it, man, is that I don't think that he's incapable of having big moments. We've seen it. He does. I mean, when things get tight and the game is pretty tight, he doesn't really get too rattled. I will say that about Anthony. And he doesn't take sacks. He avoids sacks with the best of them. And I think people were like, well, he should know, man. It's a skill. His pocket presence is pretty good. But the throwing, I think at the end of the day, we could talk about all these different things. And as my guy, Mike Chappell, who's finishing up, I believe his 40th season covering the Colts, he always says,
love it.
It doesn't matter, Jim, if your quarterback isn't the guy. You can have all these things. Perfect example is probably Pittsburgh these last few years. You can have all these. You can have good culture, a good coach, good defense, but if your quarterback isn't a guy, you can never really get to where you want to go. And I just wonder, not only just winning big, but just winning consistently with Anthony when you can't complete enough passes to keep your offense on the field and moving. And I think that that's a pretty big thing that he has to work through and they have to answer for. So again, this team is at a, I don't want to say crossroads, or maybe they are, but something has to change. And I think DeForest Buckner hit it. You saw his comments, Jim. That guy, when he speaks, it matters. And he signed up to be back here, as many of them did. But again, I just wonder about, even the psyche of this team. Like, Jim, do you believe that they're going to win their next big game?
No.
That's what I'm saying.
No, of course not. I mean, again, I was just thinking about even the big Anthony Richardson moments this year that we've seen came against the Jets and the Patriots, and those were 1-point wins. Not to say that's an indictment of him. He did what he needed to do to win those games, but they're barely beating bad teams. They couldn't beat the Giants. This is not a good team. I'm not even sure that their win-loss record is indicative of who they are. I think they might be worse, which is. When you look back at what Jim Irsay said in the beginning of your story about the high expectations for this team, and then you look at what they actually accomplished this year, it just speaks to take this all the way back to the beginning. It speaks to the Chris Ballard era. Frankly, it truly does. It just is. It's never as good as you want it to be. It's never as good as you think it might be. I mean, I think every year, whether it's local media or national media, people are like, "Man, this Colts team, you never know. Like, they got some talent," and every year they figure out a way to come up just a little bit short, or a lot short in a couple of years ago. But I can't. It's funny. One of the questions I wanted to ask you about this as we were talking through, and we kind of did this in the order of your story, which I appreciate. We kind of talked about Ballard, then we talked about Steichen, then we talked about Richardson. But like, I think so often about the environment these quarterbacks are put into. The Sam Darnold example, right? With the Jets and the Panthers. The Baker Mayfield example with the Browns, and then the Panthers, and Geno Smith with the Jets, and all these veterans who have come back from the dead, supposedly, and revitalized their career to become, well, in some cases, Pro Bowlers and excellent NFL quarterbacks leading their team to the playoffs. Environments matter. Coaching matters. Culture matters. And now I'm looking at the Colts, and I'm seeing what Anthony Richardson got dropped into, and I'm not absolving him of blame. Don't get me wrong. He needs to be a better player. But I do wonder, did they give him a shot? Like, did the media, like the culture and the team and the environment that they dropped him into, what quarterback would there have been other quarterbacks who have succeeded? Maybe, but it's certainly not an ideal one. It just isn't. Just in terms of learning to be a pro, clearly it's not. Because when you have a guy with a C on your chest who's fighting with Pat McAfee, that's just not it. It's just not it. That's not a culture or a locker you need to be in.
And then the point you make about leadership and captain qualities, the part that they have never answered, and we pretty much laid it out in the story. Why did you make Anthony a captain if he wasn't one? And I get it. If you don't make your rookie quarterback you drafted in the top 5 a captain going into his first season, that's going to be a huge media storm, big deal, whatever.
Yeah, but a good coach could handle that. A good coach could handle that.
A good franchise, a good GM.
He's got to earn it. That's it.
And everyone will respect that. They'll be like, you know what? Because it comes off as like, okay, if it got so bad where his game preparation or his lack of focus or whatever was happening behind the scenes was that bad that you felt the need to bench him. And keep in mind, it's all overlapping. If he's balling out and he ain't doing everything behind the scenes, but he's playing well, right. You know what? Forget it.
That's the Iverson, right? Practice.
Yeah, there you go.
It, right?
Yeah. Exactly. You live with it. But to have him playing poorly, not preparing the right way, but you put a C on his chest, that's a ridiculous thing. That to me, that screams, and I get it. The culture word is a buzzword for fans to just take shots at the team. And I do think that it's a bit overstated. And I will say that, people are like, the great teams, they don't have, people that are late and all this. If you look at the Chiefs' culture,
Yeah, every
Seriously,
team,
like I'm
every team
serious.
has
I
problems.
I just chose the Chiefs in general because they're the back-to-back Super Bowl champs.
Yeah.
They've got guys, get arrested. Obviously, you can look
Yep.
into what has happened with, Andy Reid's son on
Yep.
staff. Feel free to Google that. Like, these are big things. But at the end of the day, they're able to overcome them and hold people accountable and find a way to win. And so I'm not obviously absolving the things that some of these players have done off the field. I don't want to
No.
say that. But I'm saying when it comes to the Colts and it comes to this accountability and culture thing, yes, people are going to be late for every team. That does happen.
It
There's
does.
been scratches and stuff like that. But again, your messaging can't just be, oh, well, you know what? That happens on every team. Some guys don't show up on time every time. We have a standard. Well, what is it? It shouldn't take for Gus Bradley to say, players are fine, which we know as people who work in the NFL, but some people might genuinely might not know. You are fined. I'll give you a perfect example of just how like minute it can be. I did it in the story last year on Shane with Michael Pittman Jr. He was saying, I forgot to weigh out of practice one time. You get fined for that. You got to weigh in and out of practice during training camp. Like, that's how much they monitor these guys. So, like, there is no team out there where you're just showing up whenever you want to. Every player is late. Like, that isn't happening. But again, the fact that this was put out there and DeForest Buckner is saying, you know what? Yeah, we had to have some accountability, talks. And you're not definitively saying, hey, I have a standard. We're going to uphold it. If guys aren't doing this and that, we're going to, hold them to a certain standard. We're going to do this. But to just kind of, it came off as being a bit apathetic. And I'm like, that's not that. You can't be like that if you're the coach. And again, your young quarterback is supposed to grow up and learn from you and others on this team. And so, again, that's tough. That's tough.
I was going to say, use the example that the veteran brought up in your story, the Lions. Like, look at Dan Campbell. Look at Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams has been suspended twice, once for gambling, once for, I think, performance-enhancing drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's had to come back from that, and he's become a major contributor to that team this year. Not to say that it absolves him of all the things that he did poorly, but Dan Campbell is a leader of that team and knows how to get his leaders of the team to get Jameson Williams to straighten his act up and to how to fold that back in and not let that become an issue or a cultural problem for them.
Right. And to my knowledge, he doesn't have a C on his chest.
No, but
he
look at Mike
wasn't
Tomlin.
given this. Right.
Look at all the issues the Steelers have had over the years. But you could just highlight the receivers. Just pick the receivers. George Pickens is a constant issue. And Antonio Brown was a huge headache. Look at what he did when he left the Steelers. But again, Mike Tomlin commands the respect. Le'Veon Bell, look, he commands the respect in the locker room, and they figure it out and straighten it out, and he controls the messaging every time. So, yeah, it's a big issue for me with Steichen. And I try to give grace to the guys who are new at their jobs. And this is true of rookies in the NFL. So I try to give grace to Anthony Richardson, saying he's naive. He doesn't understand exactly what it means to be a quarterback in the NFL. Some guys don't have that. So I'm trying to give grace. Shane Steichen hasn't been a head coach in the NFL for very long. This is only his second year. I try to give grace. Where I have an issue sometimes with giving grace is the GM sometimes he's been here for 8 years. And he should know better in a lot of situations and circumstances. So I understand there's frustration with the GM. I understand there should be frustration with the coach and the quarterback. Now, it's up to you individually to know whether or not you want to give grace and forgive and see if they can rebound and get better from it, learn from it. I think coaches, just like players, get better as they go, or should. They need to learn from their mistakes. It's very troubling, as we talked about, that Shane Steichen did not learn from his messaging mistake early in the season.
Yes.
But I think if you're looking for reason to hope for the future, is that he is a detail-oriented person. He is a process-oriented person. You'd have to hope, if he stays, which I'm assuming he does, that he will learn from these mistakes and he will help Anthony Richardson grow and learn from these mistakes. But this year, they've just fallen into the same trap over and over and over again. And that is so frustrating if you're a Colts fan, because you've seen this movie so many times, and it's just aggravating to have to rewatch over and over again.
Absolutely. And I think that is the button we can put on this. Why does this Colts season feel like the others? And again, this is only my third season on the beat, but just talking to others who've been here longer than me, obviously Mike Chappell among them, he's seen the glory days and he's seen these days. And I think it's really tough to say this team or look at this team for what it once was and to swallow what it is now. I mean, the Colts are not a good team. They're not a good franchise. All the upper quartile talk that we heard just over 2 years ago, it's gone, man. Like, this team is
they're a lower quartile team. They're a lower quartile team right now. They truly are.
as I said after the Giants game, my little post-game video at MetLife Stadium, the Colts are just good enough every year to break their fans' hearts and make them mad. You don't have a high pick. I mean, so what are you doing this season to give anybody a belief that things will change? And I think that's where we can kind of like leave it at, Jim. I'm seriously. Well, what do you think is going to change? I mean, what can you see change?
It's the question you asked Chris Ballard at the beginning of the year. Why should people believe in your process? Why should you? And now you're asking the same question. Why should people believe in what you're doing? You asked that question at the beginning of the year, and now it's 18 weeks later, and here we are again.
Exactly. So, again, not much to discuss about the actual game. For those of you interested in that, if you want to go to the game, the tickets are probably pretty cheap this week. So obviously we'll have more to come on the podcast. Obviously with The Athletic, when it comes to end of season things, I'll be all over that stuff for sure. But thanks for tuning in and joining me and Jim on this podcast. And obviously, if you haven't read the story yet, I'll end it with that. Check out the story that me and Zach Kiefer wrote on the 2024 Colts and why they can't seem to change who they are now versus who they were in the past.